Alright, hello. My name is John, and I will be showing you a little bit about how to do file management in ArcCatalog and how to develop a logical file structure. So the first thing you want to keep in mind is when you're working with GIS software are the files you will be using for carrying out a geospatial analysis of a given data set or multiple data sets is that you should be doing your work within your file management system. In the case of ArcMap or ArcDesktop, the correct software for file management is ArcCatalog, uh, not Windows Explorer. You don't want to use this to manage your data. That's very poor form, and the reason for that is that there can be metadata or multiple files that are associated together to create a unified file. And a case for that would be a shapefile, and we can go into more detail on that later, but it's just good practice to get in the habit of using ArcCatalog for all your file management within ArcMap. Specifically, if you're using something like Quantum GIS or Grass GIS, your file management software are our management systems are going to be different. So that's just something to keep in mind here. All right, so let's move along here. I have you'll see that I have folder connections, and these folder connections are links to specific file paths, and you'll also notice that these are on the C drive. So when you're using ArcCatalog, you're going to want to be as close to the C drive as possible, and the reason for that is because ArcGIS uses is underlined by a Unix system, and Unix operates best at the C drive and closest to the C drive. So once your file structure starts getting more complicated, it's going to become problematic to create or to process that data. And you may not notice it immediately. You might see some things that look okay, but eventually what might happen is you go through and you try to process some data, and you'll notice that there's some kind of weird artifacts or something doesn't seem quite right. And the reason for that most likely is what you're seeing is related to having excessively long file paths, or there could be some other things such as illegal characters, and I'll go into that in a second. So you'll see that I'm at the C drive here. I'm in GIS, so I know that if I'm to talk to somebody about the work I'm doing, it will be at GIS. And here I'm going to be working within the TurfDoc folder. So I have grouped all of these together in a certain way. That being that TurfDoc is going to be everything related to my turf science or agricultural science work. And so by grouping those things together, I can have subfolders. Now again, you'll need to keep in mind that you're not building too complex of a folder system, but the idea is that it's scalable. So here in TurfDoc, since I just have one data, or I would just want to build the file structure for one project, I can go in here and create new folder, and I'll create databases. I'll also come in and for the work that I'm doing right now on this, I know that I'll need I need to create data first. Data. And then you'll notice that sometimes your graphics card or the way the interface works, it may not correctly show it over here. So you might have to come over to this component or this area, the catalog tree. So you can go into data and databases. So, okay, I'll just go back to data real quick. And then in here, I know I'll need rasters and shape files. Okay, so and then I'll also need documents. maps, output, tools, and transfer. So you'll notice that these are I have some folders here, and you may think, well, I have, for my specific data that I'm working with, maybe in your project you're working with LiDAR data. So you could just come here and you could type in LiDAR, and boom, there you have a folder for LiDAR. So you're able to create that, and it is scalable in that you can add different types of data in here. And your documents, so I know for this specific project that I'm working on, I need to have a folder that has research, so that would be PDFs related to specific research, and the bibliographies. I know that this will also have presentations, manuals, licenses, and hardware. So this is the way I've chosen to organize this. Here you could organize it really however you want. And then for output, I want specifically a folder for maps, and a folder for reports. So you might be looking at this and say, hey, you have a folder called maps within output. You also have a folder called maps just under TurfDoc. Why would you do something like that? Well, what I'm used to doing is putting my MXDs, or my map document files, into the maps here, but my output, I'm going to want to output PDFs and JPEGs and PNGs of those same maps, but it will become really, really complicated if I start putting them into here, or there's just going to be too many files, and that's going to become problematic. So I put it out here into output. And then transfer, if you input, or if you start downloading data from online, a good place to put it is in transfer. And then the data that you need, you can do some geoprocessing and pull it into your database or into your shape files. And so that way you have a data size reduction, and at the same time you provide yourself with an easy file structure to come back to and just delete what's in there if you're not going to need that again. And presumably you'll have moved your data over from transfer into your file structure over here. So it makes data and file management very easy. So I would encourage you to do that. So the other thing that I mentioned is to stay away from certain naming conventions. So here you'll notice that they're all lowercase, so you'll want to lowercase things here. So instead of having turf doc, I have turf doc. And the reason for that is some cases the computer can get confused, which is really strange, but I think it has something to do with it being a Unix, underlined by Unix. So you have that. You shouldn't do things like turf doc. Because of no spaces. You don't want spaces here, and the reason for that is that it can cause some issues with the underlying Unix system. You'll also want to stay away from illegal characters such as these, really any of these fun ones where you have to do shift and the number. So you'll want to stay away from those. It's just very, it causes some issues. And you might put in some spaces and put in some exclamation marks or plus signs and dashes and things, and you'll see that your data processes, and you're like, oh great, okay, I can do this now. This guy didn't know what he was talking about. And then eventually what's going to happen is you'll have been up for 13 hours working on a project processing some data, and you'll be 13 hours into getting that work done, and then all of a sudden you'll realize that your values that you're getting make absolutely no sense, and you'll realize, oh, it was that illegal character. I should have actually listened to that guy that was on the internet, and I'll tell you, I told you so. And because that definitely never ever happened to me before. And so, this is just lessons learned from my personal experience, and I am trying to save you some headache um, by passing those lessons learned along. So keep that in mind as you build a file structure and as you name your files. One last thing of note is that raster files, for whatever reason, um, raster raster files should be no more than 13 characters in length. Our raster file names should be no more than 13 characters in length, and that has something to do again with the underlying Unix system. Shape files, debatable. Okay, so how do you get around this? Because sometimes you'll be like, oh, hey, I need more than 13 characters for whatever reason. A workaround has been to put everything into a file geodatabase and just to go more than 13 characters in there. So you can do that, but we'll go more into those details further down the line. Just keep in mind right now that if you're placing things within the raster folder, your name should be no more than 13 characters in length. All right, so I'll leave it at that for right now, and have fun setting up your file structure for your GIS projects.